Welcome back to Carl and Rick Talk Risk. Rick, how are you?
Unbelievable. 10 out of 10. But I also might lie and also might not be all that quantitatively oriented or whatever.
Well, we're doing better
Cynical,
than
sarcastic,
yeah. Yeah, we've discussed it's stormy and gloomy outside for everybody, so it could be worse. We could be outside. Um, Rick, I want to talk to you about something today that's, I think, near and dear to both of our hearts, but I think doesn't get said enough as general career advice, but also for risk managers in particular, and that's the role of writing.
Oh, love it.
Yeah, and I don't mean writing a novel. I don't mean writing senior management reports. For the past couple of weeks, I've forgotten about a really good habit that I normally have, which is writing my to-do list and having things on a pad next to me about what I want to do, thoughts I have, so they don't get lost in my jumble of a head. Um, so I'm talking about that sort of writing. I'm talking about, quality explanations and reports. I'm talking about weekly or monthly sort of blog posts that you might put out there to kind of wrap your head around something new. You and I have discussed on this podcast Intelligent Risk, which you've written for, I've written for. So we're obviously very involved as writers, as editors. But I want you to talk about a little bit what's the role of writing in a risk manager's career, and how can it help them?
Well, first off, I think that every risk manager, I think that, and we discussed this before, I think that risk management suffers from a huge marketing problem.
Yeah.
Okay. And a large part of marketing is communication. Uh, uh, Risk management is one part storytelling, one part quantitative analysis, and one part communication. And I believe that every risk manager should read Ogilvy on advertising as part of their standard curricula before they ever get a risk management job. Um, the marketing and communication is so tied up with how you use words. It's so
Mhm.
tied up also extending beyond words into how you tell a story. Again, another classic risk, sorry, again, do as I say, not as I mispronounce. Another classic risk book, in my view, is The Art of the Long View by Peter Schwartz, who was basically head of strategic planning. I believe it was for Shell, and people might send me angry emails, which is fine if I screwed that up. But in that book, he talks about in strategic planning and very closely aligned risk management, the importance of storytelling, creating pictures, images in people's minds. This is something that the risk activists are very good at, and something for the most part that risk professionals not so good at.
To put it
Okay,
lightly. Yeah.
yeah, um, and this dichotomy between what the incorrect perception is because of the activists and what the correct perception is uh, because of the inadequacy of the writing skills and more broader the communication skills
Yeah.
of the risk professionals. That creates a lot of issues, not only within a company or within an organization, but within the organization and their larger context. Uh, but with risk management globally, and in fact, uh, it's the basis of another book. Probably my one of the top three risk books I have is Risk, The Science and Politics of Fear by Dan Gardner. And if you read between that book, it's literally uh, all of our misconceptions and all of our problems with risk management, in large part, and I'm being very unfair to the book, stem from the dichotomy between the professionalism of writing and marketing of the risk activists
Mhm.
and the inadequacy and lack of good communication and marketing and writing by the risk professionals. I
Yeah.
believe that's absolutely critical. Words matter, communication matters, storytelling matters, and this is all something that's lost. One of the things, sorry, I got to shut up and let you respond, but one of the things that risk professionals don't realize is not everyone is as quantitatively oriented as they are.
Yeah.
And so, not only in writing, but it's in communicating um, quantitative analysis. It's absolutely key. And man, the worst charts I've ever seen come from risk reports or the worst risk analysis. And there's a
Yeah.
whole industry, you know, read Tuft, okay? The visual display, quantitative information. I'll shut
Yeah.
up. Boy, you,
Yeah.
you
No.
touched a sore spot here, okay? I mean,
Yeah.
and by the way, just before I let you get a word in, it's do as I say, not as I do, because I'm not the world's best communicator or writer by any stretch of imagination.
But you pay attention to it, and you put it in its proper place, which I like, because you don't get that from professional risk managers. Very few acknowledge that this is a big deal. Like, we need to do this well. So, but and it's funny because the flip side of that coin is a lot of risk managers complain that, oh, the front office never listens to us. The traders, they're not taking our VAR calculations into consideration. Well, how did you tell them?
Well, if you're boring as heck,
Yeah,
of course.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, content, presentation, simplicity are so important. I know we've touched on this several times already from that book we reviewed by Morgan Housel about simplicity, the value of simplicity, keeping things to their essentials. But you brought something up with me offline a couple of times, and I'm going to raise it here because I know I know it's interesting to this, and I know you do it with students. Yeah, it's about communication, not just writing. You were telling me about a presentation method which doesn't have any words on it at all. Each slide is only a picture, and I think you even mentioned a version of this where you only have so many seconds per slide, and you've got to get your message out. And this is a way of, I think, training students to present better, to think a little more abstractly about what they're trying to do, not rely on slides, which too many people do, but talk about that a little bit.
Okay, well, first off, now we're really going to have listeners complaining because I'm going to have to apologize in advance to everyone who knows Japanese or even who knows uh, English. But of course, what you're referring to is pekakucha. And again, apologies for the pronunciation. And there's a closely aligned form of that called an Ignite presentation.
Mhm.
Both of them are very similar. Pekakucha is also called a 20 by 20, where you have 20 slides, 20 seconds per slide with the slides going automatically. And it's just a picture on the PowerPoint slide. And ironically, I'm actually doing one of those at a major leadership conference in early November in Chicago. So if you're in the Chicagoland area, drop by the International Leadership Association conference and say hi. Um, what it forces you to do is to think in terms of 20 points. And each of those 20 points has to be succinct. Secondly, what it forces you to do is to think of 1 point per slide. You can't have 2 points per slide if you only have 20 seconds. The third thing that it forces you to do that I think might actually be the most powerful is it forces you to think of what image do I want to leave with this? And not only what image, but if I think of it as a movie, because the slides are moving relatively quickly, 20 seconds, what movie do I want to leave?
Mm-hmm.
And uh, in risk writing, I think that we don't find the balance between pictures, i.e. charts, and numbers and words. And there needs to be a balance between those. And we need to think in short, very concrete, distinct points before moving on to the next point. Yes, I realize risk management is nuanced and everything is connected. Remember, folks, I'm into complexity. I get it. I understand it.
Yeah.
But even in an adaptive complexity framework, you have points, connection, points, connection. Uh, and so going from the points, succinct, no pun intended, to the point, and then on to the next point, next image. And the other thing about the images is what do you feel, or what feeling do you want to have in the viewers or readers or audience's mind? And although I was told in finance class when I was doing my studies that, a finance or a risk person never feels, they might conjecture, they might speculate, yada, 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 but they never, ever, ever, ever feel. Ultimately, how you get people to act is through feelings, whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
So, my writing, I've had several people criticize my book. Well, it could be written, it could be read by someone in high school. Well, wow, you really hurt me with that one. I'm going, woohoo, more readers. And,
And you followed up with, you mean you got all the way to the end?
Yeah. And the point is we think that in order to sound smart, our writing has to be incomprehensible. I would argue the exact opposite, that in order to show that we understand our subject, we have to go back, and I forget who said it. I think Einstein said a version of it, von Neumann, or Richard Feynman said a version of it, is that if you can't explain it to someone in grade 6, you don't know what you're talking about. And just one more point before I shut up again. Let's face it, every group of risk managers having lunch together at an offsite watering hole will say, I can't believe our managers even got through grade 6. So if you think that they only have a grade 6 intelligence, then write for a grade 6 intelligence, damn it.
Yeah.
And everyone will be far happier, in my opinion. Words matter, communication matters.
Yeah. How I wasn't planning to follow up with this, but how can somebody get better at this? They're listening to this podcast and they're thinking to themselves, well, that's great, Carl and Rick, but I don't have a chance to do a lot of presentations. How can somebody improve this?
Well, first off, assuming that you have a really good psychologist and or a friend who is immediately willing to get you severely intoxicated or distract you dramatically in some shape or form, actually record yourself.
Okay.
Okay. I'll never forget. By the way, that is incredibly depressing. Incredibly depressing.
It's the reason we don't watch these afterwards.
I'll never forget. I gave a major presentation at a university in the southern U.S. and this was way back when I still had a professional career in the real world. Okay. And a lot of people came up afterwards and said all the right things. And by the way, I was expecting a group of 30 students, and it turned out to be an audience of about 2,500. And I simply was not expecting that, but that was fine. Didn't change what I was going to say. But anyhow, they wanted to publish it in their university newsletter, magazine, or whatever. And so they had someone transcribe the speech.
Right.
I read the transcription. I was like, oh my God. And again, it was a presentation. It wasn't a speech, so I'm not reading from notes.
Yeah.
And I never read from notes, and my slides are all mainly pictures. So if I'm using a PowerPoint, again, I'm not reading the slides in any way, shape, or form. I was like, oh my God, is that really it? Oh, I can't believe that that I wasn't stoned about 5 minutes in. So, one of the ways to improve is to actually record yourself and watch it. And no, you are not as bad as you think that you are.
Yeah.
Likewise, in your writing, read it aloud.
Yeah. 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 Exactly. Um, I like the first thing you said about having a therapist or a good friend, because I mean, getting somebody else to read something and say and asking them to be critical is a great way to improve as well,
Yeah,
right?
but friends, but you're never going to get an honest opinion.
No, you need an honest critic. Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, yeah.
And by the way, you're generally never honest with yourself, but
That's true. Yeah.
most of the time you're totally honest with yourself. You never get to the end of anything that you wrote.
Yeah, no, that's true. Okay, well, I'll put it this way. If you find somebody who can do that, who can play that role for you, and you tell them, like, have at it, like, tear this up. Yeah, that is a great way to learn really fast. Anyway,
In class, just real quick, in our
yeah,
class, every week, for my MBA students, and some people think that this is cruel and unusual punishment, but instead of going over the homework, we have two students randomly selected to present their homework.
okay,
And of course, I do a beat up on it.
okay,
And it's and of course I try to tailor it to the level of where I believe that the students are at. So a really good student, I'll go at them really hard, and someone who's a little bit weaker in the subject, I'll go at them a little bit different. And of course, the students dread this. Okay, when we do the random selection, I have a little Excel sheet where names pop up or their faces pop up, depending upon how energetic I was with the programming. Um, uh, they dread it. The number one thing I hear from alumni, and I hear from a lot of alumni, I'm pretty fortunate that way. Number one thing I hear from alumni is the value of the beat ups. Although
yeah,
they hated it at the time, it proved absolutely invaluable later in their career.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Better early. You get
Yeah.
used to it. Later on, yeah, you can put it in perspective.
Yeah.
Um, Very good advice. Okay. Well, thanks, Rick. This has been a good session. Until next time, it's been Carl and Rick Talk Risk. Comment. Tell us what you think about this. Is writing important to your career? Yeah, we'll be back soon.
Have
Cheers,
fun,
Rick.
everyone.
Adios.